All right, guys, here we are, live and direct from the BBQ studios. The BBQ Nerd Podcast is live this Monday. Here we go. Tonight's episode, very exciting one. We're going to be discussing with you, getting fired up with the BBQ Nerds. Tonight's the art of searing steaks using wood and charcoal. With me, as always, is our co-host, the one and only Mr. Frank Cox, the smoke builder guru himself.
Hey, buddy. What's up, man? Can you hear me okay?
I got you live and direct. Welcome.
Okay, cool. I had to kind of, like guy that looks like falls off the train and kind of like rolls in and then bam, here we are. That's kind of what just happened to me. So I'm excited to be here, buddy.
Oh, it's great to have you here. So
yeah.
Frank, let's grab our tongs, let's stroke those coals, and let's get into it. And remember, this episode is brought to you by Smokeslinger Pits. If you're serious about barbecue, head over to smokeslingerpits.com for the gear that'll make your grilling game up to the next level.
You must have had like some free time to like get prepared and stuff. You're doing a phenomenal job. You're the official intro guy from now on.
Frank, what are you drinking tonight? Because I got with me one of these Yingling Black and Tans left over from last night's Super Bowl. Go Birds. Crack that open right now.
I really wanted to grab a beer, but I literally didn't have time. So I've got me an American Royal cup from like back in the day. You can see this one's had some miles on it. We just got us some good old cold water right now. Yep. Hey,
so we've got, looks like we've got Dustin McCormick here with us tonight. Dustin is our builder. He's saying a what's up to everybody. We've got Moose saying hello to all the gentlemen that are out there. We've got Carlton, who's in the house. Carlton's giving us a shout out. He's looking to cook some steaks. Hojo from Hojo's Barbecue is here this evening. And Demoose giving a shout out to you, Frank, as
what's
well
up,
as
dude?
a double peace sign.
Glad to see you here. So I wanted to let you know something. Over the weekend, I was able to actually remove all of the. You'll hear them on the live. Anytime I'm talking, you'll hear. I just did it again. Anyway, there is an free podcast episode. I just did it again on iTunes and everywhere else. So if you get on over to the iTunes or any of your favorite podcast platforms, the audio's been corrected and you can join along there while you're driving. I'm pretty excited about that, dude. I got that done in no time.
And it looks like you got yourself a new fancy mic. Look at that.
Now this one here, just to show, I hope it doesn't disconnect. This thing is an OG, man. This one is dirty and everything. It's welding shop dirty. So we've had this one a while, but it's so old that the cable, I had to use a GoPro cable. That's how old it is. An old GoPro cable that I found to get it going. So anyway, we got her going. I'm really glad that we got this episode up here going today. Are you ready to talk about steaks?
Oh, I'm ready to kick it off with some direct grilling. And I have a feeling that when we're talking about searing steaks, that our first level is going to be that classic approach, that direct grilling. Would you say that that's about where we start this tonight?
I think so. Yeah. Direct over to coals. There's, in my opinion, there is no wrong way to cook a steak. I would rather have a well-done steak than no steak at all. I'll be honest with you. However, I would prefer not to have a well-done steak and let's get up into the color grading there and get some doneness on that, But yeah, for direct heat cooking, a few of my favorite cookers is of course the Smoke Slinger. That's what I've been cooking on lately. But we've also got the, PK grills, Weber kettles, the OG Weber kettle, brick and, just coals on the ground with a grate over it. What are a few that you're thinking of?
You brought up that Weber kettle, and I got to tell you, that is definitely the American classic. People like Guga out there have really been able to demonstrate its capacity of being able to separate one area where you have your hot coals and the other area where that carryover radiant heat is, so that you can cook your meats on one side. And then it's really unique what he does. He uses his tongs and spins the grate around instead of picking up the steak and moving it over, and puts it directly over that fire so that it gets flame kissed. You know, when you think about it, that high heat, you're thinking 450 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. You slap that steak down, sear each side for about 2 to 3 minutes, and you've got the perfect Maillard reaction going on. But you got to be careful not to overdo it. Nobody wants a burnt steak.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I guess with cookers, you can do the direct heat cooker. We just listed off so I guess we should cover cookers first, and then go into like doneness, and maybe even get into some different alternative methods. So with cookers anyway, the direct heat ones we just talked about. Some of the other ways you can cook a steak is you don't have to sear it necessarily. You could actually just smoke it, right? I've done a few of them that way. I don't really know that crust is the definition of the perfect steak, necessarily. But I mean, somebody's going to get mad and yell at me in the comments, but I've had some dang good steaks that were just smoked, How about you?
I've had some pretty good smoked meat, but I'm telling you, I like that steakhouse classic. I like, what they call Pittsburgh style, where it's kind of black and blued, where you do get that crusty, caramelized exterior. It's perfect for thinner cuts like ribeyes and sirloins. I'm a ribeye guy. So, if I'm at a steakhouse and they've got like a nice 1.5 to 2 inch thick steak, that's definitely the type of item I'm looking for that evening. And I want that char.
Okay. So blue rare is what I'm hearing you say you like.
It's black and blue. Yeah. It's black on the outside. It's everything seared on the inside. I do like it a good medium rare. Same thing. If I'm heading over to, say, like a Peter Luger's, and I'm going to get myself a porterhouse. And, I was a glutton in the past. I had no problem getting a porterhouse for dinner, porterhouse for two. And then when they'd come around for dessert, I'd have another one for dessert as well. I had a dessert steak. No shame in my game.
The old Ron Swanson.
Oh, yeah. Before Ron Swanson.
Before Ron Swanson?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, another steak, I believe is what he said. Yeah. So the other way we're going to talk about is caveman style a little bit, which, I've done quite a few caveman steaks. Have you ever cooked one that way?
I was with you. That was an experience. The first time
I forgot about that. I did that in Florida, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
With that skirt.
Mm-hmm.
So for the true experience, though, that had already been cooked for a little while on the smoke slinger before I threw it in. So it was overcooked in that scenario. Most people would have said overcooked. It was done, like well done kind of. But what I think I like about that method is it's just like anything goes. Throw it on the coals. Charcoal won't hurt nobody. Matter of fact, they give it to you when you get poisoned to clean you up. So it's got to be good for you. So with caveman style, though, you're just having fun. I don't think that anybody would do a caveman style steak to like impress anybody with the perfect steak. It's more or less like, this is awesome. It's real caveman. Grab a beer. You go for it. So
that was definitely one of the most unique ways that I've had a steak. And as we progress through this conversation tonight, there were some concerns I had when you did that, namely this ash all over the steak. But we're going to get to that, because you're a master at what you did, and I had to overcome that. And I saw what you did.
Oh, you didn't like it?
No. I didn't. We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But when you threw that steak in, the first thing that went to my mind was there's going to be ash all over this thing. And it wasn't the heat. It wasn't that, it's all on a coal. It was the ash from the coal that was now coating the other side, as if we put on a secret rub.
Awesome. Okay. So let's get into let's define, first of all, a really good sear. And then let's get into like the doneness levels, maybe before we talk about methods. So we
Sure.
get some vocabulary. Go ahead and describe to us what you think the perfect sear is.
Hmm.
Is it
I
burnt?
would say, well, no, I would. It doesn't have to be burnt. It crisping it up so that you get that caramelized outside. It doesn't necessarily have to happen. So when it comes down to it, I like to see those grill marks on there, whether it be from the round bar, and you just happen to rotate the steak at a 45-degree angle, so you get the diamonds, or like we see on our expanded metal, it's naturally there, so you can keep the steak in one place. And if you get that grate red hot, it's searing, and you put that steak down, you're guaranteed to get those perfect grill marks when you're using expanded metal. When we're back again with those round bar grates, there's a little bit more craft. There's a little more ingenuity into looking at the steak that you have and being able to rotate it to the correct angle so that you get all those crisscross marks on there. That's what I like to see. I want to be able to savor the juices that are on the inside. So if my steak is cooked to a perfect medium rare, whether we're doing that direct cook or we're doing an indirect cook, namely, I want to be able to cut into it, and I want to see that myosin dripping out. I want to be able to see those juices coming out of that steak before it was ever, that's correct. Before it was ever cut into, there should be nothing on the plate. It should be dry. And then when I cut it, the juices are leaking out, meaning that everything was seared and held internally.
Cool. So your opinion is that the sear kind of helps to hold in the moisture.
That's how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Then, but the rest, do you see any leakage coming out of the steak during like if you rest whenever you're cooking?
So from time to time, yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that depends upon the cut of meat that we're using as well.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, I think whenever I'm talking about a good sear, I'm of the lower temp crowd. Like I said earlier, like a smoked steak that's like perfectly. I pull it like low enough. I want pink. That's what I want whenever I'm pulling a steak out. But I also want wall to wall pink. I don't want like gray on the outside circle and then pink in the middle to me. And that's what you normally get if you just hit it and sear like right off the bat, especially with a caveman style cook, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But I do like caramelization on the steak, like you're talking about with the grill marks. I really like that. I like to see that the juices and stuff that came out whenever you put, like if you do a dry brine with salt and pepper, like SPG, let it sit on the counter, come up to room temperature. It starts pulling the proteins and all the juices and myoglobin out, whatever, and then it starts to suck that salt back in for a little bit. I like all of that right there to get hit and caramelize up, but not like black. I don't want it to be black when I'm done. I like to see kind of a red color on the out, not pink, but like that golden brown red is kind of what I like to see. But now on the fat, that's where on the ribeye, when you take that fat and you roll it up, buddy, we got to hit that hard.
Oh yeah.
Like we got to get that to render just a little bit there on the edge, get that crust on it. That's what I'm looking at when I'm talking about a sear. I suppose we should pull up, I should have done that already and pulled up Wikipedia's. Actually, I noticed they don't even have a page defining what sear is. Did you know that? Now that I remember, I typed in sear in Wikipedia to see if they defined it, and the article has not been written yet.
Interesting. I thought when you mentioned that, you looked up the word sear, and it came up with some type of military training camp.
No, but if you do Google sear definition, I'm sure it'll pull up something up. Let's see what sorry. Here we go. It says burn or scorch the surface of something with a sudden intense heat. The water got so hot that it seared our lips. Ugh. That's weird. So anyway, to burn, scorch, mark, or whatever. So that's what it says for sear. Now, I guess that is what we're doing with the steak, huh?
That is what we're doing.
We're injuring it. We're burning it in
Correct.
a spot.
Consider this in the restaurant business. All right. We've used a torch to be able to put that sear on the outside. Same way that you see creme brulee sometimes done at the table, where we have a pocket torch. The manner of being able to get that last bit sear, it's not the reverse sear. You're putting a torch directly on it and crisping it up. And that's what a lot of these guys are doing now when they're sous vide their steaks, cooking it to the perfect temperature. They cut the bag open, pull it out, and then you hit it with a torch to be able to get that color, that burn on the outside.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I haven't done that yet. I keep meaning to try that at some point, but that's pretty cool, man. So let's talk about doneness and stuff, right? So sure. when they do these Steak Cook-Off Association cooks and things like that, doneness is like determined that it is like medium is basically what, like right at, slightly before and slightly after medium. There's like this window, and then that's the good, the good zone there, how you get scored. I could be wrong on that exactly, but if there's an SCA guy in here, let me know. But by the way, drop your comments and questions in the chat there on YouTube and in the comments on Facebook. We are going to be answering questions towards the 45-minute mark there. But anyway, as far as a doneness scale, I think we've all seen that floating around in a picture. You've got basically blue rare, which is what we talked about a minute. It's basically raw in the middle with a little with the sear on the outside. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and it only goes in, that doneness only goes in a little ways. It doesn't go way into the middle. It just goes in a little bit, and that's the steak that everybody's going to send back at Colton's when you go to Colton's or whatever, or Longhorn Steakhouse, except for the cattleman. That guy's going to be like, oh yeah, knock its horns off. We're done. We're there, So anyway, then right above that would be rare. Blue rare is basically raw in the middle. And then there's rare, right? We've got, what is the temperature on that? Like the finished temperature, like 110, 112, 115. You think?
I like to I'd say the inside, it's still cool. It's not even, it's raw.
Warm.
It's warm. There's a time it's still got a chill on the inside.
Yeah. Oh, still got a chill.
Yeah. Look, now if this is lamb, if we're doing like those baby lamb chops, I'll go with you there. I like that where it's still cool on the outside and it's got a good sear on the outside. It's cool on the inside, seared on the outside. I know we're discussing steak tonight, but you just put that idea in my head, and suddenly I'm thinking, I want those lollipop lamb chops just slightly salted on the outside. Yeah.
So then we go into medium rare, which is just above that. That's my favorite starting spot. If a steak hit the table or the plate and I'm picking steaks out and I happen to be the luck of the draw that I get a medium rare to just past medium, I'm happy as a lark. You'll never hear me complain. But there you go. Demoose said the same. So for me, that's the perfect steak. If I'm saying, and it's kind of hard to keep it low enough and get that sear, that darker sear, I believe. If you have a little bit longer cook like that, there's a real skill to hitting that zone. We're going to talk about carryover here in a little bit too. So, and then after that, we've got medium, which is defined as a warm pink, slightly pink center, right? Slightly pink. So we're starting to get more doneness into the middle, right? And then we go up to medium well. And then there's too damn done, is what they always said, isn't it? Which is well done.
Yeah, the steak already died. There's no need to kill it again.
Yeah.
We already killed the cow.
So well done is no pink. We're getting up close to that 150 to 160 range right there, internal temp. Sometimes more when you get into that well done.
Well done is you're not going to dinner with me. That's not happening. You're not coming out with me to a steakhouse and ordering like a steak like that. You're not coming to my house and I'm cooking for you and you're telling me like, do you mind putting that back on? It doesn't quite have that grandmother shoe leather to it.
Yeah.
Not going to do it. But I'll tell you that for perfect thick cuts, like a tomahawk, a ribeye, a porterhouse, or even filet mignon, I would smoke or grill that steak to around 225 until it hits, just about the 10 to 15 below the target temperature. Then I crank that heat way up and sear it off with that killer crust.
Yeah. So now we're talking about more of a reverse sear. So searing, if you're just going to sear a steak, like you're just going to cook it and you're going to sear it, right? That sear is like we went straight to the high heat for the entire cook. And then we're going to pull it off and rest. So when I see the steak cook-off guys, they're getting their PK grill or their MK grill or whatever brand of grill, the little portable grill that they use. They're using charcoal. They get the charcoal super blazing hot. It's all white, gray coals, super even temperature. And then they've got their little raised up little table thing that it's like, usually it's made out of like some thin aluminum. It's got like legs on it or whatever, or it's like a baker rack looking thing that's pretty small in size that they put a piece of foil on it, and then they can set that off like up so it's farther away from the coals and maybe off to the side a little bit. So what they'll do is they'll actually sear the steak first, and then they'll get it up to a certain temperature internally, and then they'll take it and lift it up at whatever that target temperature is and let it coast to where it hits that temperature. But what you just talked about was my favorite method, which is a reverse sear. And that's where we're going to have a target temperature that's much lower than our finish temperature, usually about 10 to 15 degrees lower than the temperature we want it to finish at. Maybe 5 to 10 it could be, depending on your style. And we're going to do exactly what you said. We're going to bring it up at a lower temperature. What you said, 225?
Yep.
Yeah, is what you like. And I'm usually somewhere between 225 and 240. I kind of build my wings on the way down a little bit when I'm cooking. Then we're going to give it so much time. Like if it's going to take, I don't know, just throwing a number out there, 10 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever it is for this steak. Usually they always used to say 4 minutes per side, right? Or whatever. So you want to cut that in whatever your total cook time is for the reverse sear part. You want to divide that in half, realizing that when you flip it, the other side's not going to take as long to come up to temperature. And then you're going to pull it at a temperature lower than your doneness. What do you do on yours with Blue Rare? I'm just curious.
So the reverse sear is kind of the new methodology that I've adopted. From the time that I was young, everything was always that you put your steak on the grill, you get that grill as hot as possible, and you want to get it seared off on both sides. You're sealing it in. All the juices in, and then you lower your temperature down so that the internal temperature of the steak can adjust to that. This whole reverse sear is something that's been new to me, but I'll tell you that since I've been doing this, what I find to be really great about reverse searing is control. You're not stressing about overcooking. You can get that even pink edge-to-edge doneness with a crispy exterior. And if you're using a smoker or indirect heat, and wood like cherry or apple that you're using, you can get that subtle smoke ring, which adds another dimension. That's not something that you can do when you just crank your grill up, crank your smoker up, and you put the meat on. You don't have that ability to be able to add subtle flavors in. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah.
This whole methodology has been instrumental to, when I'm with you and I'm speaking to other people and I'm cooking this type of cuisine, that there's just, with all the rubs and flavors I've added to the outside, the smoke flavor that I can add internally, the colors that I'm getting is just, it's phenomenal.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, but I was typing, did you say your doneness temp, like you're trying to pull at?
Well, I'm pulling it 225. That's simply where I want to be. I'm going to pull a 1025, and then I'm going to, after I pull it, I'm going to let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes at that point, and then get it back on, because I want the meat at this point to allow the juices to come back in, and then bam, it's like flashing it with heat, and sealing that in and getting that crust on the outside.
Gotcha. Okay. So what I'm doing whenever I'm doing it is I'm following, I'm doing 225 on the cooker. I'm sorry, 225 to 240. I locked up for a second. And then I'm bringing I'm putting it down on one side, and then I give myself about 3 to 4 minutes, and then I flip. And when I flip, I have to actually check temperature because I'm not skilled enough to not check temperature. And then I'm letting that internal temp coast up, and I want to pull it somewhere around like 115 to 120, depending on what my finish temperature is going to be, whatever I'm searing at. So if I do, if I pull it at like 115, 118, something like that internal temp during the coast up section of my reverse sear, then I'm going to go ahead and hit it as like on the pork steaks I did the other day, because I do pork steaks, pork chops the same way. I'll hit those on that direct coals, like probably 3 inches up from the top of my coal bed. That's like a 2 second, like 1 to 2 second. I can hold my hand there temperature, and I'll get that up till I'll do 1 minute, flip it 1 minute, and I'll check temp, and I should be right around 133 internal temperature. Then I pull it off because I want to finish somewhere around 140 to 145 is what I want to finish if I'm doing medium. That's what I usually do. So the pork steaks, the pork chops, actually, when I do a loin chop, that's what I'm targeting is 145. You could go a little bit less on beef than you can on pork. I guess we should talk about that a little bit too.
I was just going to comment here. Carlton's got a good point. He's writing here that he likes to smoke the meat and then he sears it on a cast iron pan. So he's getting cast iron pan red hot, from what I'm understanding. If I'm not, type it in the chat. I'll bring it up. But he's smoking that meat so that it's all at the same temperature, and then he's getting that pan red hot, throwing it in, and finishing it off. So in this case, you're not getting the marks from the grill grates, but rather you're getting an even coating all the way through on both sides of your meat, and you're probably taking your tongs, pinching it up, and then getting all the sides. In the words of Bradley, don't forget your sides.
Don't forget your sides.
Don't forget the sides.
That's right. Yeah. And that I did that on those pork those pork chops I did too. Let's talk about thickness of your steak right now, real quick, for a minute. What kind of thickness are you shooting for a ribeye? Tell me your favorite.
Here we go. So I like a generous cut. I like to start at no less than 1.5 inches. I don't like these thin.
Wow.
Steaks. Yeah, and when I say that, no less than that, I have no problem taking a porterhouse and cutting it at 4 inches. There's no shame in that game. That's a steak that takes when you're now see this is where this methodology of reverse sear comes into play. If I took a 4-inch thick steak and I just simply put this onto a charcoal grill, I'm going to have a problem because the outside is going to cook. That. The inside is going to start to get that graying, and then I'm going to be raw in the middle. And it doesn't make a difference how many times I flip this thing. I stand it up on the bone. Every which way that I do this, I'm going to have a problem. So the only way to do this is to cook it almost like in an oven, which I'm not doing, but you're getting that radiant heat coming around, going low and slow so the meat cooks all the way through, and then finishing it off. And again, there's no shame in that game. You take a 4-inch porterhouse and you put that out on the plate. In the words of Kevin Costner, if you build it, they will come. They will go the distance.
Dude, that's a good old dadgum. Like, I don't even know if I have ever even been around a steak that thick. So, that thick of a porterhouse. Now, the porterhouse has got a bone in it, right?
That's
I'm not
correct.
a porterhouse guy.
That's a short loin. So you get your porterhouse, and then as you begin to lose that tail, that filet mignon, what you end up with is your T-bone.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know what Tommy Boy has to say about looking for a good T-bone, where to find it.
Yeah, that's right. So, so I'm more of the 1 inch to like 1.5 inch club, I think is where I'm at on the steak that I like. I guess it's just easier for me to deal with on cooking and stuff, but you're right. definitely, it's like cooking a tri-tip at that point,
Right.
a 4-inch thick steak. That's pretty crazy. Okay. So we've covered the definition of sear, first of all. We've covered what else did we cover here? Help me out. We did
So we've got the direct heat. We've
that's right.
got
We started there.
the reverse flow. And I don't know if you're ready to go there yet, because we're getting into some really interesting areas of meat and thicknesses of cuts and preparation. Because that next one you're about to bring on, that's a whole new way of cooking that you showed me.
Yeah, I love it, actually. It's one of my favorites. So, okay. So caveman style, of course, you think about a caveman. Did he really just throw the meat right in the coals? I don't think he really did that, but we call it that. I've also heard guys do the shovel steak. Have you ever heard of the shovel steak?
Is that the one where you cook it on the shovel?
On the shovel. Yeah.
I've heard of it. Haven't done it.
There's something that happens with caveman steak. So you're literally taking this steak, you got it brined, dry brined, whatever, and then you take and throw that thing right on top of the coals. What I've noticed I've done a lot of steaks that way, and this is usually just good old boy talking. We're sitting there like a Argentine asado, like when we're cooking and we're just eating all day. This is a steak that I'm gonna throw in there real quick. We're all gathered around the cooker or the campfire or whatever. When you yank it out, stick it on a plate, cut it up, we're all going to have a bite of it. We're just like grazing at this point. And it's fun to do it that way. So when you take that steak and set it down on the coals, it actually eliminates oxygen from the coals. So it's not super hot. As a matter of fact, you're going to have to stir your coals when you flip it back over if you're trying to get an even cook on your steak. So, because you don't want it to choke out those coals. It's way more effective to cook it up off of the coals. That's where the shovel method comes in. So if you take your shovel and set it in the coals, now we're heating up that steel, and the steel is going to hold the heat a lot better. Just like the skillet sear method that Carlton was talking about. Mm-hmm. What's up, Micah? Anyway, you take the shovel and you stick it in the coals. Of course, it's all oiled up and seasoned. It's not, you ain't been out doing yard work with it or nothing. And you heat that shovel up, get it oiled up, slap your steak down on there, and you're searing that one side of it right on top of the coals, but it's preventing all the juices from getting down in the coals and like choking those coals out. And then you can flip it over and do the other side. Both are really great methods. But the caveman steak is, it just kind of is like if you're at the golf course or something and you got a bunch of guys. I did this one time. There was a bunch of guys standing there. We were cooking briskets for that night, and it was lunchtime. We're going to eat something real quick. So we just took the cheapest ribeyes we could find and sliced them about, 7/16, half of an inch thick, pretty thin. And we just threw them in the coals like that, and we made steak sandwiches. And man, you talk about good. It just hits the spot. And those guys, their minds were just blown. When you can do the showman thing and just throw them things in the coals, pull them out, brush it off with your tongs, so nobody bites a live ember, and go for it.
What you said is exactly what I watched you do. And there was a little bit of a panic when you started this off. But you took the steak, you threw it directly onto that lump charcoal, which burns
in the firebox of the Liberty 94.
And I was about to get to that, because this is where the Smoke Slinger Liberty 94 offset comes in clutch. The pit holds such a consistent temp, making that reverse sear a breeze. But when you were able to take it, throw it directly in the firebox to finish, there was that little bit of concern. But you did just what you said. You got that insanely charred crust with a smoky primal flavor, and then you just brushed off any of the little bit of ash that was on there. It was delicious.
Yeah, it was good.
And then when we dipped it in that chimichurri, oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. What I really like is just a little bit of salt, like just some little trimmed up stuff, a little bit of salt, a little cilantro, a little bit of lime, like a little lime wedge, and a few little serranos or something sitting there, and a tortilla. And it is game on. If you take that skirt, because that was a skirt, I think is what we threw in there. You take that skirt steak and cut it across the grain. That's something else we need to bring up real quick too. Cut it across the grain after you bring it out. Now everybody's got a really nice bite. But anyway, yeah, that's good stuff. You want to get some comments here real quick before we go into?
That's what I'm looking at here. I'm rolling through here.
You guys are awesome.
It looks like I just smoked 4 new straps, then grilled them for a few. That was that. The fat was. I'm assuming that doesn't mean his heart was on fire. I'm going to say that I think it was delicious, and he didn't need a Crestor or something or Lipitor in order to handle the high grease.
I think that was a fire,
fire.
Fire. Anyway,
you know what? One of the things when it comes to mind about this caveman style is that the steak gets a real campfire soul. But you got to be mindful not to overcook it and make sure that the coals are white hot and ashed over when you do this. When you're searing for about 1 to 2 minutes per side, that's all it really took.
Yeah.
And if I was to do this, obviously when the weather's nice out here and I can get people over the house again, this is definitely going to be a showstopper at my barbecue parties too. People are going to see me tossing a steak on the coals, and suddenly I'm going to become the pitmaster everybody wants to talk about. So I'm going to have to adopt this new mode of cooking.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So another thing that I was bringing up there was about the direction that you slice whenever you're cutting a steak up for people, right? So something I did not know until I went to Al Fragone's class was that whoever is the guy that's like you're bringing a picanha out, right?
Correct.
Okay, so when if you ever go to like one of those Brazilian steakhouses or whatever, and he's got the big sword and he's got the picanha on the end of that sword, down on there like that, and he brings over and says, "Would you like a slice?" So he is slicing with the grain. I didn't realize that. And he's slicing with the grain so that when that little wedge of steak comes off on the plate, the person that's eating it now can slice across the grain. So he gets the opportunity to get the best bite. Otherwise, he's going to be slicing with the grain whenever he gets his bite. So you're like setting it up for success. Isn't that interesting? Have you ever been to a place that did that?
I have. And now that you bring up the picanha with that delicious, that rump meat, so tender. It's the queen of beef. The way that that's prepared is you take that whole picanha, and it kind of has a triangle shape to it. Let's try to get that going. Sliced, and then each one is then bent over into a C shape, and then that sword goes through it. So as that's on that rotisserie, that rodizio that's going around, all they're doing is putting that Argentinian salt on. That's the only seasoning. That's why each and every bite that you get when he's coming over and he's slicing it off, because you've got your tongs in your hand, and your green light means just keep bringing me more meats. At a certain point, they then have to bring that back into the kitchen, put it back onto the rotisserie, and cook it again, because the way that that's done is it's only cooking to a certain point where that piece of that section of meat is cooked, and then it's still raw on the inside.
Yeah. They keep it rolling that way. But so you're trying to set up whoever you're cooking the steak for, you're trying to set them up so that they have the opportunity to cut across the grain. So they get that really tender bite when they're pulling that apart. I thought that was really interesting.
I love those rodizios. Cool. I love the way that that's done. And that gets us right back to that sear again. They're just searing in a different method. Typically, they're still using a hot coal bed. They're using lump charcoal down below, but then the wall that's behind it, if it's not the rotisserie that's doing this, and some of them do this, they have live coal right underneath, and it's doing this the whole time. But when you get into some of your other commercial establishments, like a Fogo de Chao, they're using prime beef, but the way that their system works is that it's gas operated, it's gas fired. So you have an entire wall, and the rotisseries are coming down, and each one is spinning. I tend to like the ones that are, growing up in the New York area, going to Newark, getting the Portuguese food, where they're cooking directly over that hot lump charcoal. To this point, I still think that wood charcoal has the most superior flavor. And once you go in that direction, it's very difficult to go back to a natural gas or propane grill. because the way that it just, to me, it feels like I'm just cooking in an oven at that point. You can't get that flavor. As much as these companies have tried by instituting flavorizer bars in an area where you soak wood chips and put it in, you just can't replicate that same flavor that you get on a pit like a smoke slinger, which brings us back to, again, that smoke slinger, the availability, being able to load it up, those charcoal pans with your charcoal, putting in your wood splits, and being able to cook direct heat those steaks. In fact, the greatest part is being able to take the entire charcoal basket out, set it on the tuning plates, and putting your steak directly over that, right on your expanded metal, right over that, and doing what you had mentioned earlier, similar to like that caveman cook. Or you go right from the top that you're cooking, open up your door, throw it right in, just like you did.
Pull the drawer out, drop it in.
That's it.
Yeah, that's super fun, man. You know, there's nothing like cooking with a real fire, man, like with a wood or charcoal. I had to correct myself from saying real fire because, you know, there's a lot of different ways to get real fire, but, you know, a wood or charcoal fire, you know, you just can't beat it. Now, as far as like the fire itself, right? My favorite way is to use post oak or mesquite or something that's going to burn super hot and dry, right? And I like to get embers going is what I like to do. I think embers are a lot better to cook with than flame. I think flame just kind of like you said, it kisses the outside, which that's cool to have, but we're not going to get that doneness from the inside out as long as we got flames hitting it like that. What's your experience with that?
So I would say that for direct grilling or caveman style, I would probably go with an oak or hickory, hardwoods that burn hot and steady. So, but for reverse here, I'd go with fruit woods like cherry or apple, which add a nice subtle sweetness. In the way that we've been talking tonight, and from some of my experiences, again, I can't go with that caveman, except the time that I watched you do that, and it was delicious. But whether it's a reverse sear or I'm cooking direct heat, I think that the type of woods that I'm using and the closeness to that fire come into play. Just going through my mind right now, if I was to go to my walk-in box that I have and go grab myself a fresh Pismo, I would think that if I cut myself a nice center cut thick fillet, I would probably want to cook that over what's available to me here in northeastern Pennsylvania, white oak or red oak, and then supplement in maybe if I had the availability, some of that cherry wood, just to be able to get the color. I've always found that with cherry wood, you get a real nice reddish tint, whereas when I'm using the apple wood, it imparts just a slight amount of sweetness. I like applewood when I'm doing pork.
Yeah, good stuff, man. So now talk about some steak identification, butcher man. Let's talk about give me a identify a porterhouse and a T-bone. Like, what's the difference for the new guys in here? You know, give us some steak terminology with the meat cuts.
Well, again, what we have there is an entire short loin. And I recommend to people, if you're going to do this, if you're going to try to do this at home, if you have a butcher where you can get hanging meat, you get that whole short loin primal. Using a bandsaw, even now, bandsaws kind of make me nervous. I'm just, there's safety that's involved with that, and I know that there is, that, you know, not to get my hands caught, but I'm still not too comfortable with it. I do, however, for the home guys, I would recommend getting yourself a cleaned Sawzall. If you have one in the house, clean it up, make it real nice, put a brand new blade on that, and you can cut right through the bone to be able to cut yourself your porterhouses and then down to your T-bones, whatever size you want. Getting yourself a hacksaw is a great way to be able to cut in between. If you're, so let's say you're dealing with your ribeyes, for example, you have the whole rib. It's a great way to be able to cut the rib to the point where you can then get in there with your boning knife and finish off your cut. You've got your hook, you've got your knife, and you can come right across and separate that out. And then once you have your rib on your table, then you're able to simply slice between the bones, once you take the chine bones off.
Mm.
When we're dealing with our fillets, when we're talking about the entire pismo, it's necessary to get the chain off of that. But because it's a boneless piece of meat, it's a great way for anybody at home, whether you're going to go to your Costco, your BJ's, your Sam's Club. If you're in Texas, you can go to your local HEB. If you have a restaurant depot by you, you can go in there. It's a boneless piece of meat. That's a great way to practice. It's a little bit more expensive than some of the other cuts that are out there, but you have the flexibility in knowing that 100% of that piece of meat, besides the silver skin, is something that you can use. So even if you make a mistake, listen, the mistake becomes little pieces on the side that you are the chef's tasters. You put that in a frying pan, you put it on a skewer, make yourself some kebabs with that. Later on, if you have extra pieces of meat and you want to make a really good hamburger, grind it up and make yourself a filet mignon burger. We call that whole piece of pismo. And then what you do is, as you trim that down, then you have your tourneau of beef. You get your Chateaubriand out of that. You get your center cut filet mignons. So that gets us into that. Then we get into our New York strip. Actually, let's go back one. When we're looking at a porterhouse, we're looking at a short loin. That bottom tail portion that you're looking at, that's your filet mignon. Then you have your New York strip, and then you have your sirloin on the other side. So then what you're essentially doing is getting 3 pieces of meat in one. I would suggest, again, if you're going to go about doing this at home, if you have the availability of getting it, just use a Sawzall, cut through the bone. If not, and you want to cut your own steaks and you're able to get an entire bone-in ribeye, it's very simple. Just follow in between the bones the same way that you would if you had a rack of ribs. You're just going to use a larger knife and a little bit more force. You want the knife to do the work. You really shouldn't be sawing away. This is for those that don't have super sharp knives or the availability to be able to send your knives out to be sharpened. Using a steel is just honing the blade. All that's doing is making sure that all the little teeth on there are all in alignment. When you need to get that knife truly sharpened, you need to get that 30-degree blade, that 15-degree, 30-degree angled blade. If you have someone who has the modality to do that, have them do it, or I'll send it out to somebody professionally. I know that I've seen people do this. They have a stone at home, a whetstone, and they're able to work the blade over the stone in order to get it sharpened. That's an excellent way of doing it. But if you don't have a sharp blade, anytime you cut meat, it shouldn't be that you're sawing the whole time. We don't saw. We also don't use just one area where we go back and forth and back and forth. If a blade is this big, you want to use that entire length of that blade. Use your cimanter. I wish I had some of the blades in here with me now. I would show off. We'll use this in a future show. Your cimanter to come right in between. Think of it like an entire rack of your St. Louis ribs or your baby back ribs, and just cut right in between, and you'll separate your whole rib steak out. And then if you want to get fancy, we're not talking here about making tomahawks, but if you want to make a cowboy ribeye, then you could French the bone. And Frenching the bone is nothing more than cleaning it up. And then you get that beautiful look. If you're going to put this hot and fast onto your grill, or even you're going to go low and slow, because during that sear, you want to burn things up. Just put a piece of tin foil around that bone so that you retain that color without burning it up. Same thing when it goes to that rack of lamb that I was talking about earlier, those lollipop lamb chops. Once they're Frenched up, make sure you put some tin foil on there, because the fat from lamb is so flammable that you will have yourself a flaming Mose if you don't take care. It's just going to burst into flames. In fact, one of the best things to do is to take a half pan, a catering half pan, disposable, put some salt into the bottom of that so that as the grease is dripping down, it goes into the pan and not directly onto the flames. Because if it does go onto the flames, the likelihood is you're going to have a grease fire.
Yeah.
And that's my short answer to your question.
Yeah. So whenever you're doing tomahawks and stuff like that, I guess you should tie the meat right around around the steak, so it doesn't fall apart, because you're going to want to pick it up by the handle, because that looks cool.
Well, it does. Using butcher twine is extremely helpful. I don't do it often. It's something that, going back to those that are in the state championships, they do that because it's all about the look. But here, if I'm going to put several tomahawks on, I'm grabbing not by the bone. I'm actually going to grab it with my tongs and flip the whole thing over, grabbing the meat. For that reason that you're talking about, where it's such a tender, delicious piece of meat that you do have that propensity that the spinalis muscle can come separate from the eye of the ribeye. And that spinalis muscle is delicious. It's so tender. It's awesome. Don't let your butchers cut that off and keep it for themselves.
Dude, I got to be honest with you. These days, I don't want the butchers doing any more than they got to. It really seems like the cuts that you get at the store, like the normal grocery store, they're just not as good as they could be. You know, they leave some lacking. I don't know if they're just lazy now or sloppy or just unskilled or what it is for the most part. But I'm even finding with briskets now. Tell me if you saw this with briskets or pork butts or whatever. When you cut the cryovac and open that thing up, there's like trim that's been sat in there to give it more weight.
Correct.
Like they got too greedy with the knife and they just stick that back in there.
Yep.
Other things. So anyway, that's pretty disappointing. But okay, so go back in time when you were talking about that whole big old roast, whatever it was that you were talking about there that had bones and stuff. Did you tell me what that is called before you broke out the Sawzall?
Okay, so that whole thing was the short loin.
Okay, that's a short loin.
That's a short loin. Yeah,
bones and all.
The bone in and all. But if you're going to have a porterhouse or you're going to have a T-bone, you have that bone in there. That's that bone that makes the T. So you're having to cut in between that. And when they do this on a bandsaw professionally, you're just, you hear that, you're zipping right through it, pushing the meat right between that bandsaw. The guys that do this constantly, the union butchers, they're really good to know exactly where to put their hands, where to grab it on the opposite side. And that's when I'm watching them do this, I'm like, whoa, I have a comfort level that I'm at, and I'm afraid that if I move as fast as they do, which is necessary, that I'm going to make that slip up. And it happens all the time. People lose a finger.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just
unfortunate. Yeah. Bandsaw is next level stuff, man. Do you remember the video of that bacon slicer I showed you that I worked on that time?
Yeah, it's a scary piece of. So that's another piece of equipment that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
It's give the listeners and viewers an idea what it was. So the food equipment, Frank, the one that used to work on refrigeration food equipment, we had to work on a lot of this stuff. The Oliver bread slicers that you stick the whole loaf in and it comes out sliced, it's got a million knives in it. Well, this was a bacon slicer that did the entire, like a whole trim, like they take block that belly out. They stick that belly on there. It not only does it slice it, but it also staggers the slices and puts it on the little thing in one movement. The whole thing is sliced, it's a freaking crazy machine. And the butcher equipment, you got to be pretty careful with all that stuff. You could get hurt pretty quick. Did you see any questions in the chat?
I'm looking in here. I'm going through what.
Well, we're going for a
lot of guys giving each other and ladies, guys and ladies, girls in here, giving each other high fives, slapping each other around. Hey, how you doing? Such.
Good stuff.
Here's one right here. I'm looking for anyone that might have a question. It looks like what we're doing is we're making people hungry.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people right now that are looking for food.
Got to give Daddy Dutch a shout out.
Oh yes,
he's in here. Belt Loop's been keeping it together,
and Nicole Ruiz for keeping us entertained the entire time. I have no idea what she's talking about. She's got random conversations. There's a little bit of dementia that might be going on with her as well. I don't think that's a real person, so I feel free to say that
happens once in a while.
And if that is a real person, then you get some help. This is when you need to get some help.
Let's see.
I have a question for you. Do you
Okay.
season before or after searing? Because I'm a big believer in seasoning before. Salt helps with that crust and a little pepper, garlic, maybe some smoked paprika really bring out the flavor. But what about you?
So I'm an SPG guy to start with. I like a salt brine because it's gonna, like we say, the salt is the only seasoning that can actually penetrate deep into the meat. It reverse osmosis, kind of thing, or
Yeah,
osmosis, whichever one it is. It's going to be able to suck that salt flavor down inside if you let it sit there in salt brine, and then all that. And I could be using the wrong terminology here, but myoglobin and all the juicy stuff that comes out of the steak, when that comes out, it's going to emulsify. That's the exchange that happens when the salt goes in, and that's going to emulsify everything that's on the surface. And while that other stuff can't come in very far, it will travel in a little bit through that layer. And then when smoke hits that, that's where we're getting the smoke ring from, that chemical reaction that happens with the smoke and all of
right.
that stuff. So for me, I'm an SPG guy to start with. And then if I'm being fancy, I'm gonna dust it before I like plate it, maybe just a little bit, like with some finishing dust. Or I'm not good enough to do this, but I've had buddies that are, like I'm thinking of my buddy Mr. Voigt, Aaron Voigt. He can flat out throw down when it comes to compound butter, making some good compound butter. That's like the butter with the seasonings and stuff in it. And then you could even melt that down and make like a rosemary sprig brush. And you could, if you're doing the pan method, like Carlton talked about, now you got the juju that's going to stay in there with the steak, and you've got the butter and all that stuff, the rosemary and the thyme thing that you whip up and brush that thing down. That's the way I like it right there. A little bit of
I
finishing dust is good, though.
do you
You
use?
know,
Is there any type of finishing salts that you use? Do you use like an Argentinian salt, or do you use a sea salt? Do you use a fleur de sel, a volcanic black salt, a Himalayan
I,
pink salt?
I do
Were you
have
aware of
Himalayan
all these
pink
salts?
salt. I
Okay,
do have that, but I also do have some smoked sea salt,
gotcha.
some apple smoked sea salt that I've messed with a couple of times. And actually, where we used that the most was when we were doing a chuck roast. When you make these days it's rich man burn ends, it's not poor man's no more. But when you take that chuck roast, cook it like a brisket point, and cube that thing up, it is like heaven if you do it right. And then you take that and cube it up, and then start just like right before you take that bite, you just dab it down in a little bit of that salt and take yourself a bite. That's real good.
That is delicious.
Hey,
Um,
did you hear me cough just then, or was it muted?
no, you hit the cough button. You did it
Okay,
perfect.
good,
Yeah,
good. I did a good job. So
yeah, and you had that teed up just the right way.
yeah. Cheese. Oh, here. Who was it earlier on here was talking about peppers and onions and provolone? Because you remember when we did the Philly cheesesteak video here the other day. Here we go. Belt Loop brought it up. He said when we were talking about um, the caveman steak, I think, and I brought up that I like all the onions and the serranos and stuff like that. He said, do that and throw in here. We have the power of bring it up. Do that and throw in some onions and bell peppers, maybe some provolone cheese. Do you remember the guys that were giving us crap about the provolone cheese in the comments?
They're just not understanding the reason why provolone cheese. You got to use the
Yeah,
provolone.
yeah. I think
Obviously,
you had Carlton up.
if you have the cheese whiz, that's the way to go. If you don't have that, then the next one to go with is Cooper cheese, which is like a white American cheese. The brand is called Cooper. And then finally, if you're going to go with that Italian cheesesteak, provolone cheese, you got to have that on there. And of course, your peppers, your onions, and if you want to really get Philly, then you add on those vinegar peppers to give it a little bit of a kick. The same thing goes if we were going to make, which we might go ahead and do, an Italian pork sandwich, again native to Philly. we're going to go ahead and roast that pork almost like it's a porchetta. And then when we finish it off, we're going to slice that up nice and thin on our slicer, on our 10-inch slicer. Put that into our hoagie roll, and then top that off with some pork gravy, some provolone, little broccoli rabe or spinach, and let's not forget the long hots.
Long hots.
Yep.
And a pork roll while we're at it.
Oh my goodness! Oh, you want to put a piece of pork roll on the pork?
Jeez, that's awesome. Cool. Well, right on, man. Anybody got a question they want to drop in the? Anybody got a question you want to drop into the comments there? We're watching here just for a couple minutes before we wrap the show up. By the way, don't forget, if you missed it on the live, you can always catch our show on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 o'clock Eastern, and it goes out on the Smoke Slinger Pits YouTube channel, Smoke Slinger Pits Facebook page, and also at Real Meat Stick on YouTube there. Yeah.
That's right.
Anything else you want to add real quick, buddy?
For those that are looking for a quote on a mini smoke slinger, full-size smoke slinger, or an all-new Liberty 94 offset, go ahead, go on over to www.smokeslinger.com, submit your information for a quote, and we'll have somebody get back to you. We are knocking these things off 2 to 3 a day, and we're probably, I know for sure, at a retail cost of $28.99 plus very affordable shipping. We are the most affordable premium cooker in the market. So
that you can get the fastest.
That you can get the fastest. We're looking at a 4-week lead time.
Yeah.
That's not something that any other pit maker in the industry right now can stand behind.
Yep. Carlton's got one question here. What do y'all think about the chuck eye? I don't have any experience with it. Can you talk about it?
Chuck eye is a great steak. It's really starting to make its way known because the grocery costs are getting extremely high. So where we discussed earlier, making a filet mignon, making that pismo, that chuck eye is the alternative. It's a tender, delicious piece of meat and a little bit lower in cost. That's something that if your local retail butcher, your grocery store doesn't have, if they happen to have a butcher there, you could request that cut and they can custom fabricate that for you. It is wonderful, but it's hard to compare one exactly to the other since that tenderloin is going to be completely a separate type of piece of meat than you're going to get from that chuck eye.
What normally happens to it? The chuck eye, like, is that just hamburger or is it chuck roast?
Well, yeah, it could become part of the chuck roast when you have that whole clod and then you're breaking it down. The chuck eye is the most tender portion of that. So typically what's left over is going to get ground up, but that's a butcher cut. Same thing with the hanger steak. Usually those hanging tenderloins, that's the butcher's cut, will not make it to the under saran wrap at your local grocery stores. Those are reserved to the side.
Yeah. Here we got a question here from Belt Loop here. Do you think going in with others to buy a whole cow is a good idea? I can tell you my experience with that. I think it's a great idea, but you both got to have like pretty good idea what you're wanting to get out of the animal. Like I told you on episode 1, when I was talking about my experience with that Sata or whatever that thing, I need to get Paul in here and ask him what that is, but that breed. But that was the best friggin' hamburger we ever had in our lives. And we cut that entire thing into hamburger, that whole cow, every bit of it. I do believe that if you both get a side, I think it's great, but you are at the mercy with that kind of a situation. You're at the mercy of the shop that cuts it up, the processor. Depending on their skill level, their patience, and their thoroughness, you're a little bit at risk on getting what you actually asked for. I think, but I think it's totally worth it because what are we talking on processing? I don't even know no more. 1,200-pound steer. I mean, what are you getting into? Or I don't know, what 1,200, 1,800, 2,000-pound steer? Like, what are you getting into on processing cost? Some shops charge by the cut. That's the ones that you got to watch out for. Right. Some guys charge by the pound or by the bag or by the, whatever.
I see the processors, the guys who are raising cattle. They are charging you by what that animal was on the scale alive. And then they tell you what the cuts are going to be based upon a full, half, and quarter share. And that's what you're going to get. Like the expectation is you're going to get so many pounds of this type of cut, and you're going to have stew beef, and you're going to have ground beef, and that's how they want to run that. I don't go in and and buy a share. I want, when I'm shopping for meat, I want to see it coming in every night from Chicago. It's coming in from the commodity markets in Chicago, from the stockyards out there. Well, actually, it's not even a stock anymore. It's hanging. So it comes in on a refrigerated truck, on a reefer truck, right down to the market, hanging on a hook. And then from that point, looking at the meat and what the USDA inspector already stamped it, I make a determination about what I want. And if I'm going to let the union guys fabricate it, then I'll put the order in for the size of the cuts that I want. And that's that. The additional cost that comes in is for the, as you were saying, per cut, is the cost of the cryo vacuuming, the cost of the time, and so forth and so on. That's why it's a lot cheaper if you just take the hanging piece of meat home and you're able to fabricate it on your own.
Yeah. So for me, what I find is that I'm not there when the guy's cutting it up, because I'm not a butcher. I know what I told him I want. Like, for instance, we just got a cow done, or a pig done here recently. And I told the guy I wanted pork butts. And the guy was like, "Oh, how much you want them to weigh?" I was like, 10 pounds. He's like, "What?" "Yeah, I just want like normal Boston butts, like, pork butts that you get at the store." No, that's not what we got. He took that butt and broke it down into 3 pieces. That's what he did. And so now we got like this little tiny, like what grandma would cook, kind of roast out of that butt. And that seems like my luck of the draw when I'm explaining to the butcher what I want. So I prefer not to go that direction. I would rather just I want a case of briskets, case pork butts. I want ribs or beef ribs, or that's kind of the direction I always tend to go with it. I think it's a better deal for me, right, that way. Yeah.
But if you were able to get the entire rib, you got the entire export rib, for example. What you'd be able to do with that is you could then get your short rib out of that, your flanking rib. Then you've got your back ribs. Then as you're trimming it down, you've got your roast if you wanted to do that, or you got your bone and rib eyes, your boneless. There's a lot more flexibility and a lot less that goes to waste.
So you're cutting it up yourself.
Correct. There's a lot more value.
Yeah. So now we can get all our trim and put it in the sausage.
The trim that's left over, you're correct. So now you got your bratwurst later on, or you got your making your own hot dogs at home. So with your pork trimmings, or if you just want to make an all beef sausage, you go about it that way.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I tell you what, guys, I appreciate you tuning in tonight. If you want, you can catch this after I edit it up and all that kind of stuff. And you can catch it on iTunes and Spotify and everywhere else on the audio. Trumpet Master just popped in. There he is. You just barely caught it. Yeah.
Got a long night. Guys probably just getting from work.
There you go, guys. Well, hey, we're going to cut it. Appreciate you guys. And we'll be back here again next Monday night. 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Catch you later.